Amazing. We're live.
Rolling.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Amazing. So we'll wait a couple minutes here while people roll in. Possibly while we're doing that, Alexei, do you want to introduce yourself and Deep Ocean Partners and what you do?
Sure. So Deep Ocean is a lender, and where we're a little bit different is that we're an ABL, so we advance capital against companies' regular assets, inventory, AR, etc. But we also look at the value of companies' acquired customers. And obviously, when we're doing that work, well, number one, we're just looking at retention a lot. And we're talking to founders a lot about retention, about CAC LTV, not just from the point of view of us making loans, but from the point of view of actually helping these operators run the business better. And a lot of the time, there are questions around, okay, so this is a great one of analysis. How do I do this on an ongoing basis? How do I manage this? How do I improve these metrics? And so we've come to know a few different tools, and yeah, happy to be talking to a few of them on this call.
Amazing. Yeah. You should shout out the fact that you're in Hawaii so that everybody is very jealous.
Yeah, when you're asking me how I am, I was trying to be a little bit shy about that, but yeah, basically Hawaii these days, and yeah, it's rough. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And it's up on the beach. I mean, it's kind of warm right now, 80 degrees out, so we haven't used AC for the first time this summer. But yeah, winter is going to be perfect. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, rubbing it in our face. Hi, I'm Elliot. I'm the other co-host for today. I'm the Director of Growth of Platter. Platter, if you don't know us, we help Shopify brands build highly converting and performing profitable storefronts. So we have two core theses. The first one is that it shouldn't cost you $100,000 in 6 months to build a world-class storefront. You don't need to wait until you're like a multi-million-dollar brand to build a really, really good store. You actually need that from the beginning. If you do like a reverse analysis and notice like if your conversion rate was like double what it was over the last couple of years, the amount of money you've left on the table will probably make you cry. So that's the first thesis. The second one is that the majority of apps in the Shopify ecosystem are features, not products. And what we mean by that is it doesn't really make a lot of sense to pay month to month for a lot of these things. The analogy I've been trying to work is probably not going to land. Is like the main upsell mechanism at a gas station are all those chocolate bars and gum by the checkout, but they paid for that once. They're not subscribing to that on an ongoing basis. So it's like part of the design of the shopping experience. And we think that's the same with a lot of things you need to build into your store. So cross sells, upsells, a lot of those features, your checkout, we help bundle them into one theme and app product so that you can build a highly converting store that also drives a lot of AOV. And at the end of the day, you're cutting out your, I guess, reliance on third-party apps and developers. I don't want to put a target on anyone today, but yeah, like those probably are eating into your P&L significantly when we help kind of wean you off of that. Alexei, what are we talking about today?
Well, I mean, I think the intro is very good. Or maybe draw a parallel to, by the way, in terms of what Platter does, is it's basically Shopify, but like Shopify itself provides a certain platform that is needed for every store out there. And I think you guys provide added features that aren't part of the stock Shopify offering. In terms of today, yeah, it's retention acquisition. So my big thing for a while has been technology, data. I've been in data science since before it was called data science. At the time, it was called data mining. And it's been pretty interesting over the years to see people beginning to look at it in different ways, taking different slices of data. And I think even more importantly, developing tools that allow you to be more proactive in acting on the insights all those analytics give you. So I think today we have 3 companies that are all pretty exciting. We'll start off with a company called Rodeo, which I think is pretty remarkable in the way that allows you to interact with prior customers as well as prior leads, anybody on your mailing list. I think right now, essentially like 40% of the customers who you're sending out SMS and emails to maybe can spot when they're coming back to your website. They up that to about 100%. And that opens up a whole universe of options in terms of fine-tuning content and so on and so forth. The second tool will be Conjura. They do a lot of skill level analysis, which I think is pretty unusual, pretty unique when you're looking at it from the point of view of acquisition and retention. Most CLV versus CAC analysis is done in aggregate by cohort as opposed to by SKU. So having that done out of the box is pretty extraordinary. And certainly not the least, I think the last will be Prescient, which is a media mix modeling tool. And if you're not familiar with media mix modeling, you should be. And if as you become acquainted with what you'll discover is that it's a massively complex field with tons of research, tons of libraries, tons of PhDs who themselves are still baffled as to how to do it really well. What is the cutting edge of the space right now? And Prescient has the good fortune of having raised over $10 million to help them figure this out. I think they've come a very long way in doing that. And they have one of the best offerings in the market, which I think is going to be very helpful for any companies out there which are trying to figure out what are their actual CACs. But last touch, first touch, MTA, all the tracking is becoming less and less effective. But really, what are your CACs by channel, accounting for the full customer journey through your funnel?
That was really, it sounds like you could be a salesperson for either one of those companies. I love that. Also, before we start,
I really like these tools, honestly, is the short of it.
Yeah.
All three of them.
Yeah. All partners as well. So we'll get into that at the end. Before we kick off, I really wanted to also thank the flexibility of the guests today. So Fran from Conjura wasn't able to make it because of a flight delay, and last minute it looks like Mike from Prescient also had a very unfortunate flight delay that would have put him calling in from the skies. So we have Hannah from Conjura subbing in today, and we have Will subbing in for Prescient, and they are going to kill it anyway. So let's kick off with my good friend and multi-hyphenate Ben Fisher from Rodeo. What's up, Ben?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I am live from Venice Beach, California. And so I don't know if you want me to just jump into what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also a tiny little 30 seconds on you. And
a little bit of context. Sure. I'm like the sacrificial lamb who has been, was initially going to go third and now I'm going first. So my name is Ben Fisher. I'm the co-founder and CEO/CTO of Rodeo. My background's as an engineer and programmer, and I've been very much like an e-commerce nerd for like the last 15 years and was pretty early into the Shopify ecosystem. And a lot of what I have focused on is understanding at some level how like the ecosystem within the mid-market and enterprise market work, where you have all of these different vendors. And one of the observations that I've had as an engineer is that there's a lot of really talented marketers in the space, but there's a lot of technical stuff that frankly most people don't know about that's happening. And where we see that, I would say like the biggest thing that we've been focused on recently is actually that the middle of most folks' funnels are broken. And by that, what I mean is that, so I was looking for some stats, and one that's actually crazy, and all this is really relevant to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when I was trying to think about what to talk about, is that, so it's insane. It's like 2 to 2.5 billion unique email addresses are marketed to by D2C brands every year. And, you think about the amount of money that was spent and invested through paid ads, often to acquire those email addresses, the amount of money that was spent enriching those email addresses with data to try to like have like demographic information, you're using CDPs to try to like take whatever data you have about a shopper or a person and combine that with targeted emailing so that like you're properly segmenting and personalizing your email marketing. What's crazy about that, actually one last thing I'll add about that, is like Amazon's sort of like the perfect example. Amazon and Walmart are like sort of like the keystone examples of, you go to Amazon, and we've all had this experience, you're automatically logged in, the products that you're presented to are personalized to you. And I think that when you're a brand, and a lot of what we've thought about is like, what is it that frankly at some level the big boys have built out and done for themselves that the rest of the market can learn from? I think the early example was Amazon's one-click buy button. I remember when that patent expired. And so there's a lot of interesting things happening right now around cookies and first-party data. And without getting too far into the nitty-gritty, what I wanted to highlight was something that I've learned, that like most marketers, specifically around retention marketing and email, like most folks just aren't aware of the nuance of when is someone identified, like at what, like, when you email someone or text them, who they are, right? I think the thing that's been surprising to me as an engineer is frankly like the gap in the range of familiarity of like when do you know who someone is, and which of your apps and tools know who a visitor is? Like, even if you are leveraging your own first party data. So I'll give you like a very basic example. So I came up with my partner Ryan. We thought of the marketer savvy scale. So like at the first level, you think of like a savvy marketer. Like, they're typically aware that most folks, most customers often will show up anonymously on your e-commerce store after clicking emails or text messages. That's actually one of the surprising things, is that even though you email someone and you know who they are, when you click a link in the email or text message, they actually arrive at your website as an anonymous user. You do have UTM parameters, and as a storefront, you are able to know what the traffic is and like what the source of that traffic is, but you don't necessarily know that it's Ben Fisher. You certainly don't actually from the email or from the at the ESP level. Even though like Klaviyo is reporting to you that Ben clicked the link, the storefront itself actually is completely disconnected from that identity piece. So that's like we'll call it the first level of savvy marketing. The savvy marketer not only knows this sort of fact about like we'll call it the visitor issue, the identity issue, but they also care about it and understand the implications for the business. Meaning that, sure, like someone arrives at the site anonymously, but what does that mean? Well, at a basic level, it's around personalization. It's about being able to present previous purchases. It's about presenting a first-time purchase offer to people when they're actually had never purchased before. I'm sure you've all experienced. I know I've experienced. I go to a site that I've purchased from before, and it's like 15% off your first purchase, and I'm like, you just sent me a promotion to come to your site. I've purchased from you before, and now you're basically showing me that I could have gotten a 15% discount, but I'm not eligible for it because I've previously purchased. It's not a great experience. It's not a huge deal, but that's like a fairly like minor example of how personalization can kind of lead to what I would describe as like broken windows, where like there's just like every storefront experience is very, very broad, and we all have the same experience regardless of who the person is, versus in email marketing where it's very, very specific and tailored. And then I'd say like the last sort of category of savvy marketer is someone who's not only knowledgeable and proactive, but they understand this problem. They're actively coming up with solutions to be able to like capitalize on personalizing data and leveraging the first party data that they have in order to improve and personalize the storefront experience. And I would say anyone attending this LinkedIn Live probably falls within like the second or third marketer title. So congratulations. And so I think what's been interesting to me is so much focus around customer acquisition is that this middle of the funnel coming from email marketing, I feel has just been kind of accepted as a truth. Like when I point out the whole identity piece of, isn't it insane that you email someone and then you have no idea who they are when they're on the site, which is why you have to like re-enter your email at checkout. It's why you have to do all these OTPs and whatnot. It's kind of like one of those things that as an industry has been accepted. And so the thing, and this is going back to tying this in, is that like when you think about the amount of money that's wasted, and not even invested in getting to know who someone is, and then it's wasted by losing that person's identity as soon as they go to the place where the transaction actually happens. The way that you see folks trying to address this today is creating personalized landing pages that are sent to different segments of your email list. I think Shopify's certainly done a lot, Ryan, trying to leverage Shop App or Shop Pay, their one-click buy button. But again, what happens is that the Shop App piece is actually disconnected from the identity piece that happens further up the funnel. And so what you are seeing is tools, and I'll get like just shamelessly like what we've done with Rodeo, developing some ways to figure out like how do you, almost like with Zapier, like how do you take and connect the data that is essentially lost at the click, right? Because this is just one example of you're losing a person's identity. You had it, and now you lost it. And then when you think about it, every single app in a storefront's tech stack, including Platter, right? Like when you know who someone is, you're able to leverage that data to be able to make personalized upsells and cross sells. And another good example is a loyalty app. If you do any sort of loyalty or store credit offer, the only way that you can present store credit is if the person is logged in. So I would actually recommend anyone on this, if you have a loyalty app, look at your loyalty flow and actually click a link that's sent to you. And what you'll probably notice is that when you click that link, you'll be sent to a login page. When you finally log in, you'll be redirected to like your general account portal, not even to the destination where you're seeing your loyalty reward points. And so like there's like very sort of nuanced issues where when you lose someone's identity, it breaks the consumer experience. So I want to be mindful around, since I'm the first person going through here, like I'd say Elliot or Alexi, like, let me know if I should shift gears into sort of like wrapping things up. Because I realized you didn't actually give me a like a signal on the timer. What's that?
Do a quick demo, just demo how the platform works.
Sure. All right. So I brought a quick example. So Create's one of the brands we work with. So first of what I wanted to show was what's an example of when your typical, like the typical store experience, if you're a shopper going to a website. So thanks, Raheem. So I'm now on Create. I came in from one of their email marketing newsletters. Click buy now. I go to the checkout page. First thing you'll notice, and again, is that like this is the typical shopping experience online. When you get to the checkout page, one thing you'll notice is that I think this is with is that it doesn't know who I am, right? Like this is 80% of people who get to your checkout abandon at this step. And when you haven't entered your email address, there's no way to retarget you. Like 9 times out of 10, they don't actually have a way to retarget you. And there's no way for them, like, even though you've gotten this far, which is among like the higher intent steps. If you're using Rodeo, the jump of this, just as a contrast, exact same experience coming from email marketing. One thing I'll point out in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that you're actually logged in. It says my account. And that's because we've actually been able to log you into your native account. If I add an item to the cart and I go to checkout, you'll notice I'm already logged in. It triggers the shop pay by default. And if I were on mobile, this would just happen out of the box. But what this also means is that 100% of all people who get to the checkout step are tracked from a retargeting perspective. So 100% of all abandoned carts, which is typically an increase of about 80% of traffic to the checkout page. So I think, one thing to keep in mind, obviously we've built this out of the box, and I would say like the authentication piece is just like the first step, because once you know who someone is, it opens up an enormous amount of opportunities around personalization, retargeting. But what we've seen with just that single step is in some cases improvements to abandonment cart flow volume by 30 to over 120%, which can result in like some brands, they'll add an additional like $30,000 a month just in pure incremental revenue from traffic that they already had coming from their email marketing. Again, like no difference. The only difference is that we're actually tracking more people. Now, like the way you might do this without using a tool like ours, because again, I think part of my hope here is that this is about a category of a problem, not just shilling our product. I think what you can do and exploring products that enable you to identify the shopper and sort of folks who specifically have already opted into your marketing, anything that you can do to provide someone a logged in personalized experience, and then investing in apps that also specifically are leveraging data that you have about a logged in shopper is I'd say one of my tips for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I'd say I nerd out in this stuff. Our team nerds out in this stuff. I'm always happy to talk to anyone. If you ever want to just like workshop or talk through some of your strategies, especially going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So regardless of whether or not we work together, I'm happy to be a resource.
Ben, quick question before we move on to Conjura. Sure. In terms of developing functionality on top of this, so if a brand has in-house development team, multiple marketers, etc., I think the value here is fairly easy to realize. Most brands don't. Do you have out-the-box integrations already in place with platforms like Stay AI that kind of support experimentation, A/B testing around this kind of customization that you're talking about enabling?
Yeah, no. So I'm glad you brought that up. So one of the things about this is when part of what we do is when we have someone's identity, we also send it to the entire tech stack. So every app, whether you're using Stay, Recharge, Skio, your loyalty app program, all of them know who the shopper is. So any application that has like personalization within it, if they have native A/B testing functionality, all of this can be leveraged within there. We do have some out of the box functionality that we have rolled out. Like, so for example, specifically, the first version is actually a hello bar like this, where you can have different offers based off of, is the person an existing customer or not? If they're a customer but not a subscriber, you can actually upsell or try to present an offer that converts their most recent purchase into a subscription, and it has a persistent top bar throughout the entire site. These are all things we're experimenting with to identify the highest ROI activities. And what I'll say is to give just a very quick example of the type of data. Like this type of data, we call it a cruise profile, is an example of essentially a JavaScript object that's available programmatically at the store level that any engineer can leverage. So if you have a dev team or an agency, all of this is available for them to create personalized experiences throughout the storefront. But part of what we are doing is we are building out some of these use cases ourselves out of the box so that it doesn't require a tech team. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very cool. Where can people find you, Ben, and Rodeo?
So I'm on LinkedIn. My username is skinny and bald because I'm kind of skinny, very bald. And our website is hey.rodeo. So HEY.rodeo, RODEO, not rodeo. Especially living in California, a lot of people think that we're Rodeo. I was like, maybe that could have been with a repronunciation with the pivot.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go for a second. Just to remind everyone about the format is we will go through the other two companies and presenters. And then at the end, we'll bring everyone back and have a sort of group discussion, questions, all that. So next up, we have Hannah from Conjura. How's it going?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. And it's lovely to chat through the different products and partners. I suppose I'll introduce what Conjura is, tell you a little bit about the problem we try and solve, or the problem a lot of brands are solving with us. And then if we have a minute or two at the end, I'll show you the platform. I'm from London. I'm from Ireland, but I'm calling in from London, hence the dark. It's a little bit dark here if it's nearly nighttime. So apologies if my voice starts cracking because I've been talking all day long. So what is Conjura? Conjura is an e-commerce analytics platform. We're a plug-and-play solution for Shopify and BigCommerce. Our USP is product performance at a SKU level. So we look at everything in terms of product performance. We look at, I suppose, our biggest piece de resistance is its product profitability at a SKU level, inclusive of ad spend. Now, why should anybody care about that? Okay, why should a brand care about that? They have an understanding about what their profitability most probably is from a P&L perspective, but why do marketeers, why do merchants and tradings care about how their products are performing from a profitability perspective? I suppose if we paint the picture of the e-commerce the last number of years, we've been very much focused on revenue growth, but as two main things have changed over the last recent history, cost of goods has increased and the cost of acquiring customer has gone through the roof. Everybody's CAC has gone through the roof. So therefore, that focus on the actual cash or revenue, is that actual cash or profitability that a brand is making has come under the lights more and more. As brands are trying to grow, are trying to internationalize and expand. But you can't understand true profitability unless you go down to that granular level of SKU level analysis. And this is where our platform is incredibly powerful because we track that SKU profitability inclusive of your ad spend. So you can then solve that exam question of which of my products, SKUs, categories, catalogs, sizes, colorways are most profitable or most performant, inclusive of that ad spend. Because when you drive ad spend to your product page, we track that ad spend all the way back to the SKU. And if I just share, I suppose I've outlined the reason why, we care about profitability, but then if we think about the ad platforms in today's world, and I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm going to try and get this right. Sorry, share screen. Let's see.
You add it, and then I'll add it from the bottom. So you just
Okay,
follow
perfect.
this.
Okay, cool. Let me try this. Does that work? Are you able to add that?
Yep, it's up.
Perfect. Okay. So I said why we should care about profitability at a SKU and product level, but when we build in the context of what we're trying to advertise on in today's world, we're trying to, our modern digital advertising has become more and more of a black box. Knowing what happens when your ad spend is pointed at your product catalog is really, really hard. We push our product catalog into Google Ads, into PMax, we put our money in there, but it's really, really, really hard to understand or get to the bottom of how that particular advertising platform is assigning that spend and to what products and to when. Okay, and why should we care about that? So what, I suppose, why does it matter if you don't know how the ad platform is spending your money across your product catalog? Because all products are not equal. Okay, they're not equal in terms of value to use your brand. You've got hero products, you've got products that you don't have a lot of stock of. Promoting out of stock options leads to customer distraction. Allowing ad platforms to spend budget on known bad sellers wastes that budget for you as a brand. So where does Conjura come in? We take this single view of a product. So taking what's happening on your website, what's happening in terms of your product attributes, what are you spending on the ad platforms, and what's your stock. So as I said, we plug and play to Shopify or BigCommerce. We plug in all your ad platforms. We plug in your GA4. It gives us the picture on the left-hand side of this screen here. And then what comes out in terms of the platform that I'll show you in a minute is everything on the right-hand side at a product and SKU level. So you can build that picture of, okay, the revenue that was realized in a product, the profitability, the contribution margin, the LTV of that product. So it's flipping everything on its head and looking at that single view of the product. All our profitability metrics are inclusive of COGS, operational costs, returns, tax, all those things to give you that closest view of the product, view of profitability at a SKU level. What's the main use case for contribution margin or trading margin is you can understand, not only can you understand the performance at a product level, but you can understand D2C versus marketplace for the same product. So let's say I'm selling, a water bottle across my Amazon space or my marketplace or my D2C. I can truly understand the level of profitability that I will attain from those 3 or 4 different channels for that same product. So it answers that question, what channel is more profitable for those products? You can also understand the organic versus paid for each SKU. So if I'm selling my water bottle on my organic channels versus my paid channels, what is the level of profitability attained across those channels? I hope that kind of paints enough of a picture of the problem within the market that we're trying to solve. We're trying to give brands the tools to understand how performant their products are. SKU level analysis, SKU level profitability is really where we're at. And then we're trying to enable brands, if I go back to the slide here, where we're trying to enable brands to curate their product catalog into the ad platforms by optimizing those product catalogs for their most profitable, most performant products so as they do not waste their, highly sought after ad spend that's being pushed into the different ad platforms that brands might be using. Does that, I suppose, does that help paint the picture around Conjura? And if so, I might stop sharing this screen and then share a little product walkthrough if I can manage that from this side. Apologies.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Let me share a window.
While you're getting set up, it's
Yeah.
so far, I guess, the two companies, it's such a no-brainer. It begs the question of like, why hasn't this always been the way that people, this true with Rodeo, is true with Conjura? It's kind of strange that people have not been doing this to date.
I suppose the one thing from our perspective, and Alexa, you might know this, Eliza, and you know this from a data perspective, is actually joining that level of granular data is quite
Right.
a heavy lift if you're going to do it once off for one brand, and maintaining the data pools, maintaining the accuracy of the data is the challenge. And I suppose we've worked over the last 7 years as a brand to build up the stability, not as a brand, sorry, as a tech platform, to build up the stability of those data pools so that we can get to that level of granularity. Because if you think about, your average apparel brand has maybe 10,000 SKUs. And if you're calculating the ad spend at that 10,000 SKUs on a daily basis to get that profitability metric, inclusive of your COGS, returns, tax, it's a heavy compute lift, is why I would say a lot of people haven't been doing it.
But it's worth it. So we dealt with Conjura's raw data quite a bit. And I think having a one-off set of mappings feed through is fine. The pain comes in when you have edge cases come up over time, and they inevitably come up. So trying to do QA on the fly with one company is just really, really painful, versus you have a platform that's working with hundreds of brands, and whenever something comes up, you have 10 people reaching out saying, hey, fix this. Chances are issues will be addressed much more quickly, much more efficiently, and ultimately, they have a team of engineers, which is, I think, more than most brands can afford.
Yeah, hopefully you can see my screen now. Can you? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, cool. So this is the Conjura platform. It's, you can connect all your connectors here. So you've got Amazon ads, all your ad platforms. As I say, we're BigCommerce and Shopify plug and play. We connect to ERP such as Brightpearl and Linworks. But down here on the left-hand side, I'm going to jump straight through our product table. We have lots of interesting analysis tables like performance overview, campaign deep dive, but our product table is our wheelhouses. Most of our brands spend 70% of their time in this dashboard. You've got all the usual functionality to slice and dice the data over historical date periods, but ultimately here, if you read across, I can look at this at a SKU level. This is just dummy data, by the way. It's our demo account, but at a SKU level, you can then see this is my contribution profit for the period that I'm looking at, inclusive of ad spend. So if we look at the tiger toy here and I read the story, we've generated a gross revenue of 8.1K, but we've actually generated a profit of not 5.39K because we spent 377 euros on ad spend. We had our COGS of 1.8 minus any returns, minus any tax, minus any refunds and discounts. This brings us to the figure that this particular SKU is making. And the aha moment we often get with a lot of brands when they first plug in is that often some of their highest revenue generating products don't actually generate them a lot of profit because they're pumping so much ad spend into that individual product to drive that revenue. Now, that's not to say you dial back on it, but you do look at it from the other KPIs. So if you go into the custom section here, everything in green on the left-hand side is an additional KPI that you can add in. So you can start looking at, okay, I want to see what my LTV contribution for the last 12 months for that product has been, or I want to see my LTV gross revenue, or I can very quickly see the hard to calculate metric of LTV to CAC ratio, and not just LTV to CAC ratio on a revenue basis, but LTV to CAC ratio on a profit basis. Okay. You then also have really interesting KPIs here. And I've lost it now. I can't find it right now, but the KPIs are assisted conversions. So assisted conversions and assisted revenue. So I call them the gateway drugs. So those products that you spend on that drive, they're the sexy, cool, products that drive people to click on the ads, to come through to your ad page. They don't necessarily buy that product, but they do generate revenue related to that product. And that KPI we list across in relation to that. Now this is at a SKU level, which is most granular, but when you have 20,000 SKUs, that might not be that interesting. We also do it at product category for brands that are resellers. So lots of brands that would sell, 5, 10, 15 different other brands. You can do it at a product brand level. You also have, at a state level, country level, product tags, order tags, promo codes, a whole host of different ways you could look at this product performance. But the key here, and I'm going to stop sharing now for a minute, the key here is that everything starts at that granular SKU level, which enables us to roll up to the level of accuracy that brings that profitability analysis across the board. Hope
Fantastic.
that's useful.
I think it's
That was
great.
really good demo. I wrote down some questions that I will save for the open discussion because I want your answers as well as everybody else's. But thank you, Hannah. We're going to make you disappear for a second.
No problem.
Cool. And now we have our last presenter, Will from Prescient AI. How's it going?
I feel like everyone needs the coffee for mine. We're getting to the end at the third presenter, but yeah, going well. That was two great ones.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the problem and opportunity that you went after, and then how the unique way that Prescient solves that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background, just real briefly, I was an investor, initially not in e-commerce broadly, but then I joined the e-commerce space as an operator for a CPG brand called Recess, where I faced a lot of these challenges that we talked about today. Then I started a company trying to acquire e-commerce businesses using data as the underpinning, right, of how to think about decision making. And I've been in the data side for the past few years at 2 different SaaS companies, now being at Prescient for the past 7 months. And really what it comes down to is I think this whole conversation is a data problem, right? Which is we have a ton of data, right, that we can actually use to make decisions. Yet the real question is, how do you use that data? At what times do you use that data? There's information overload. We talked about a lot of that data being, whether it's personalization data, whether it's, we're tracking links and data, whether we're spending money on platforms. How do you really know what is the most effective way to use that data to make decisions? And effectively, that is what attribution tools do, right, in a lot of ways. So what the tool that we're basically going to be looking at or talking about is marketing mix modeling, but the broad category is how do you actually spend marketing dollars efficiently to acquire customers that eventually then convert right into long-term buyers as well for your business, so creating LTV. And historically, before Apple iOS 14, all these pixel-related issues you've seen, a lot of reliance on last click, whether it's Google Analytics. There's multi-touch attribution tools that people use to look at distributed credit right across, or even in-platform metrics. And I think as marketers, have evolved with the space, they've just seen less reliable results out of these products. Not that they can't be used, but it's just we know that the tracking is getting harder. Identification is one help, but it's not going to be that one solve. And also, what's really important is these systems, like a Meta, for instance, are always changing the way that they're operating as well, and they're targeting. So they're not going to use a click-based, method either. They're going to what we call probabilistic modeling or measurement and inferring how to actually target users. And so if you don't have products that actually can keep up with those changes in a dynamic way, you're going to be using historical, methods, and you'll be inefficient with your marketing dollars. So really that is the huge pain point here is how do we be efficient with our marketing dollars? Because as we know, marketing is 30, it could be 30, even 50% of your spend, right, from a contribution margin standpoint. How do we then understand which channels are most effective to spend those marketing dollars? And also the third thing, how do we actually know how these channels interact with each other as well? Because we inherently know that if you spend money on, let's say, Meta, it's going to have probably an impact on Google search because someone's going to actually, have an awareness campaign from a Meta, Advantage Plus, whatever it is, or prospecting campaign. They might not convert right away, but they will come back and they'll search for your product. They'll go to Google search, brand search, they'll get credit on a last click basis or even on an MTA. And then as a marketer, you're going to sit there and say, where should I actually put my dollars? If the ROAS looks really high on Google, Meta looks lower, even though inherently you know that it probably comes from elsewhere. And then this problem actually gets exponentially harder, of course, as you add more marketing channels, and also as you add channels that are less click-based channels, like a TV, for instance, like a linear TV or CTV, where there's no inherent click in that. There's impressions delivered, but no inherent click. Or let's say influencer spend, where someone's posting about your product, and again, you might hear about it, but you don't actually get that realized, ROAS from, let's say, an influencer campaign, or you can't see it. And that's the big challenge that we're facing in the space here, and it's only getting larger, right, as restrictions come around. And I would say, the last point around that is brands also want to grow, right? And in order to grow, you have to feel confident about your marketing spend. And that's both true for marketing, for finance, for operations, for your investors, for everyone else. And if you don't start taking that seriously, right, in terms of it just becoming more efficient before scaling, that's actually lead to a lot of trouble, I think, in the business and what we've seen. And that's what customers come to us for, is they want to be more confident about their marketing spend in order to not only measure, you're going to forecast, and you're going to optimize from there. And so Prescient, does a lot of those things. So I'm happy to go right into that demo that we mentioned, kind of show a little bit about that and how we take our approach.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
I had no idea you were at Recess.
Recess was a good testing ground because a lot of times, like I was, advertising for CBD, so it was a restricted category, and we had to come up with a lot of different methods to actually get around that restriction, which is, building a brand, doing email marketing, influencer marketing. So we didn't have a lot of these tools to actually help us, and so that also kind of led me to this direction of you need to leverage some data points in order to get a decision, done. It can't just be the same ones that everyone uses, and everyone will have their own means to actually measure their business. And that's also the only thing I want to stress also before this even demo is there's multiple ways to measure your business. This is not the one size fits all solution, but it's going to definitely be a really good solution if you're looking for unbiased measurement in a way that can help you figure out how to scale your top of the funnel, mid funnel, and also potentially even the bottom of the funnel. Like you can see the interaction between the two. Let me know if you could see my screen because I can't see anyone.
Yep. Yeah, we
great.
can see it.
Awesome. So what is Prescient? So I mentioned, the beginning attribution tools. We're a marketing mix model. So kind of a next generation marketing mix model. And really what that means is we help to actually think about all your marketing channels, understand what should the optimal mix be and what is the contribution to your overall revenue. And let's say even to other KPIs like your new customers or CAC. And what's really important about this is unlike, tools of the past, which marketing mix models are actually an old technology, but these are, hyper trained with your first party data. So there's no pixels that are needed on your site in order to collect data for the product. It's all gonna be based on your transactional revenue you get from your store, whether it's a Shopify store, an Amazon store, and soon to be retail as well for us. And then what it's doing is taking the relationship between the inputs like spend, your impressions. It could be also clicks as an informative piece of the model, and looking at the relationship between this. It's a statistical relationship. It's a probability-based model. And so what happens is we'll ingest your data for at least 2 years of history, and the model will basically train on that data for those 2 years, and then start to give you really basically in 36 hours after you integrate with us, answers to what is it kind of the unbiased measurement according to our model relative to what you're seeing maybe in platform. And then also what is the forecast you might see from those channels, and then how do you optimize around that, which we'll look at pretty quickly here. So this is our homepage. I'm not going to go too far into it outside of just show one kind of core concept that I think is incredibly important for marketers, which is what we call base versus halo effects. And the way to think about this is when you're actually seeing an ad, right? Let's say you see a Meta ad, and you might end up clicking and buying right off the bat, right? So that's the kind of a direct response, we consider that our base revenue of it's likely you see it, you click, you purchase. However, in a lot of different channels, you will typically see that you won't do that, right? You'll go away, you'll have a consideration cycle, you'll come back and purchase. And so that's what we call halo effects. Is there's likely going to be some lag in actually you purchasing, but we should still give you credit for that as a transaction coming from that, initial, let's say, awareness campaign. And so we distribute halo effects to, let's say, the channels that we believe we're most confident that actually drove that initial conversion. And so we also do that across channels. So not just, let's say, in our Shopify store, but also in our Amazon store. So let's say if you are, again, on Facebook ads or Meta, you can see there's kind of a dual effect of both. There is an impact on your Amazon store and your Shopify store in terms of the halo effect. So they come purchase on both your Shopify, and also they eventually, maybe they don't purchase on Shopify, but they see the ad, they purchase on Amazon, which is what you're seeing here. And certain channels have different halo effects. Like, let's say, a Tatari, which is a CTV or linear TV in this case, and you're going to see it has all halo effects because there's no click on the TV. So we're just saying you're getting awareness from impressions here and spend, and eventually it's converting, which we call the halo effect in this case. So in our performance dashboard, it's really basically what you just saw on the homepage, but in a more summarized view of looking at measurement, right? So anything you see in green is what is directly from our models. And anything you don't see there, like a channel reported number, channel ROAS, is comparatively to the platform itself. So what you can see out of the gate, is you might see, and this is a time-based view, right, over, let's say, the last 30 days, that you're getting actually a ton more impact from Tatari than they're even reporting themselves. Right? That's pretty interesting. What's more interesting about our product is that we go down not just to the channel level, but to the campaign level. So if you want to click in directly and see the individual campaigns that are contributing to these impacts, you can get the same type of measurement on those campaigns, both ROAS, new customers, CAC, and that's going to be incredibly impactful for, let's say, LTV-based businesses looking at CAC and which platforms are driving those in campaigns. And if you really want to get deeper in some of these, you can, of course, see certain metrics, but also those halo effects and differences on the individual campaign level and see where is it being redistributed from. So again, the redistribution is going to be, it's likely from a last click perspective, maybe they're going to be actually converting off Google, but we're going to redistribute that credit to this individual Facebook campaign. And that kind of the last piece on this is also you want to know what, again, is the effectiveness of your campaign itself in terms of whether it's scaling, it could even be pulling back on this specific campaign. That's where saturation curves come into play, which this tells you the shape of the ROAS that you're actually going to see. So saturating, so this is the dash line is ROAS. And basically for this campaign, we're saying the optimal amount of, you want to achieve the highest ROAS, you should pull back your spending because this is where we're most confident you're going to see the highest return. However, if you do want to continue to spend, we'll give you a prediction around that, and we can actually track against that into the platform. And the last thing before we wrap up, in our product, you can create optimizations that will give you automatically where you can say, let me optimize, let's say you can pick individual campaigns or all of them together, and you can run optimization scenarios that help you fund or defund, certain campaigns. So I'm just going to show maybe an example campaign that was already run off our demo account. But basically, we'll shift budget for you, and this is only one channel, probably not the best type of example, but it'll tell you where to fund and defund, and it'll also give you these saturation curves so you can see, where these recommendations come through. And also, again, we'll track it automatically in the platform every day since our models update every single day and are directly connected to the platforms themselves. But that was a lot in a little time. Hopefully helpful. But in general, the goal for the product, and I think for all marketers, is we want to be more efficient with our spend. We want to know where their opportunities are to scale the spend, and also make sure we can measure channels that otherwise are very difficult to measure, with other solutions out in the market.
Perfect.
Thank you. Very helpful. I like how you left that last feature. It was almost like a Steve Jobs thing. You were just like one last thing, and it was like
no black turtleneck, but yeah,
no
I'll
black turtleneck.
try.
So I'm going to invite back the other speakers here and sort of have an open discussion. I have a list of questions. I'm sure Alexei does. I want to make this as social as possible. So, it doesn't have to be like a typical round the circle type question thing. But off the bat, the topic or name of this live was next gen acquisition and retention. Obviously, what you guys are doing feels like it's sort of at like the bleeding edge of what we're doing. But what does like next gen mean to you as someone who is on the frontier? I guess we can go from Hannah, Ben, and then Will.
May I maybe add
Yeah.
another question?
Yeah.
I think by virtue of being in the commerce space, having a lot of customers interacting with, I'm sure you're bumping up against needs that are well met by the providers versus are not. And I think to the extent that there are tools, there are sets of features that you wish brands had readily available that aren't currently available, that keep them from being able to work well with you or just operating well in general. We'd love to just hear, what that looks like. What is that opportunity set? Where do you think other entrepreneurs should set up shop? What's already overdone? What's done not well, perhaps? What is the state of e-com, and where are we headed from here from a SaaS perspective?
That last bit is a big question. Where's the state of this e-com?
Well, I think that front, like cookies are going away. Meta isn't gonna, play nice ever again. Like, I think there are certain universal truths that probably are going to be there for a while. Now the question is just, how do we adapt to them? How does the feature set improve? So, for instance, like one of the things I was discussing with somebody who's been in retention for 10 plus years is the reason why retention became topical. Like, people don't all of a sudden think that it's really cool to be calculating CLVs. They just have to, because if your acquisition is more expensive, you need to squeeze out every cent you can from customers you're acquiring. I think that's where the next gen piece comes in.
Agreed. Like if you, a little bit, if you think back historically and it touches on all three platforms here, but like it was easy to acquire customers. Not only was it cheap, but it was also easy. There was little to no regulation around keeping that customer's data and contacting them loads and lifting and dropping and tracking them across websites. The black box analogy spreads not only to the advertising platforms, but just to who is your customer coming to the website? What are they like? So getting to know your customer, getting to find them is harder. So if you do have anybody landing on your website, you have to try harder and harder and harder to keep them. And I was talking actually on another kind of webinar earlier today, and we were talking about peak, and we're all coming into peak, and like everybody's trying to find a discount in peak, but the biggest win, I think, for brands out of peak is if those people that land on your website, you can convert them within 2 to 3 months into their second time purchase. That becomes the big win for brands in this day and age. Now, I think in terms of like next gen, it's what are the ad platforms? What are the tools that brands use? So like ad platforms or the vehicles that they use to get their brand out there. How are they going to change? And I know Meta is currently beta trialing like a new feature that will take more data in product feeds and assign weights to products in the algorithm. So I think there's going to be a huge learning curve in terms of how ad algorithms are going to change over the next 6, 12 to 24 months.
Interesting.
That's something that I think it's going to change quite a bit. They're my thoughts so far.
Ben, I know you're a multi-time founder, so I'm kind of curious. If you weren't doing Rodeo, what would be tempting for you as things stand?
Farming. Joking.
DJ fish,
No, joking.
Salmon
yeah, no. I grew up on a tree farm, so it's a bad joke.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me is on one hand you have all of this, say, like sophistication, and I would say like racing to enhance everything with AI. I mean, and a lot of emphasis and focus around like what's the next acquisition channel, because early on with any new channel, that's when acquisition costs are lowest. I think what's interesting to me, and this is like what's interesting to me, is like what are the things that are being overlooked? And I think for like one, again, like this can turn, I'm trying to keep this short but sweet. I think there's a lot of, with part of what's unique to mid-market that is not an issue at enterprise is that with so many vendors, whether it's Platter, Rodeo, like Rebuy, Recharge, Skio, Stay, like there's a lot of black box data. And what ends up happening is you have like information that individual apps have that frankly is relevant or useful to, that would enhance like the user experience or enhance or enable the brand to make more money. And there's no good or simple way at some level to, I hate to say syndicate that data because it's not as simple as syndication. You also have to do something with it. And I think that like what's been remarkable to me is how many problems persist that people kind of move on from and sort of assume are truths. Like the obvious one that I was mentioning was like that, like the fact that you lose someone's identity from email.
Right.
You go from knowing who someone is to literally clicking a link and it's broken. And it's not because of any crazy magic. It's literally because you're changing channels, right? Like it is a fundamental thing that's always been true. I will say the change that has exasperated it is, you mentioned cookies and what's happening with Apple and Google, and at some level you have privacy regulation around GDPR, CCPA. I think that what I'm interested in personally is like the atomic unit for making more money as a brand is knowing who someone is. And so like these owned channels are going to be increasingly important, whether that, and I think when you're dealing with when you're dealing with channels like WhatsApp or Facebook or like most platforms, really, you don't own them. The company does. In the same way that LinkedIn, we're on LinkedIn Live right now. LinkedIn as a platform owns the audience. We don't. And I think that as a founder and as a serial founder, I've dealt with platform risk a lot. And I think there's a bit of a chicken and the egg where I would encourage anyone, whether in e-com or SaaS or whatever, it's like, I mean, I'm building on the Shopify platform. And so I'm certainly not here being like, don't build on Shopify, but there's very much an inherent risk. And I think like one of the truisms I've learned and I've seen from like marketers like Noah Kagan is one of the first things he says is build a newsletter, because email and SMS are truly the only two open channels that you own, where you actually own who the person is, or you own that relationship. And so, and again, we've seen this like with what's happened with Twitter/X. So there wasn't a prediction in there; it was more of an observation. And I think that if I were I am an entrepreneur, I'd often be looking at what are the things that drive you crazy, and that don't make sense, and to question that.
I guess, Ben, a question for you: do you think the shift towards a more open data ecosystem is going to come about from existing incumbent players being forced to share their data, or is it going to come from new entrants? You showed off the taxonomy of data you have on customers that you're tracking.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come from new players like Rodeo coming in and providing more, I guess, transparent data sets for brands to build around. Do you have a view on one versus the other?
I mean, I think I try to look at analogies. Like, so I think, and a lot of this is around incentives. I think when or if something's valuable and it's provided by, I would say, individual developers and brand platforms find it valuable, it will somehow, like, what people want, ultimately they get. I think what was interesting is I had pretty high hopes around all the things that were happening around, funny enough, like Web3 and like token economics around marketplaces. I think a lot of that, we'll see which pieces of it actually maybe downstream become like maybe a reality. I think that most platforms, though, don't really have an incentive to innovate.
That's my intuition.
That's not really an answer. I think
It is.
I think it's forced by competition.
It is. I mean, what it speaks to is that it's going to have to be new entrants driving the change, and at some point, incumbents either adopt or they become uncompetitive. Unless you're like Facebook, like there's only so much new entrants can do against a behemoth like that. I know we're coming up time, but Will, we'd love to hear from you as well. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think these are all good topics. I think in the end, it's always been my thesis, but back to the data point, there's too much data. Like there's too many tools. There's too many things like for operators to really make sense of. And that's the biggest issue to me, is that there's incredible inefficiency because of this feeling of being inundated with things to do. And just like the supply chain has been, automated in a lot of ways, and like delivery mechanisms for fulfillment, the same thing should be true of a lot of things in e-commerce. Like they should be very efficient businesses. I think marketing, for some reason, continues to be incredibly inefficient. And it's the biggest portion of spend, for any brand, and the lifeblood, to be honest, because LTV is incredibly important. I'm always a disciple of LTV, but if you don't acquire customers and you don't do it efficiently, you won't have LTV. You won't have working capital either, which is obviously near and dear to your business, which I think people are kind of missing sometimes, is like if you have a 12-year gap between when you actually get realized revenue, how do you fund that, right? How do you fund the acquisition? So you have to have a pretty dynamic system, in my opinion, where what is the right targeting, and not just for Meta, because Meta doesn't know how you're spending on other channels. They know how Meta's spending, and so that's where like we sit, and that's where I'm excited about opportunity. There is like you should have a dynamic-based decision based on your multiple methods, understand your products you're trying to sell, your Conjura potentially, right? Get that data, flow that in, understand the personalization aspects with Ben and team, but they should all be talking to each other, and it should be an automated system that makes a decision for you based on that data and tells you where to allocate your spend and then how to fund that spend through working capital. And it becomes more of a management job of understanding how these systems work and putting them together than it is, I think, what today is marketers making decisions based on multiple systems, multiple attribution tools, taking judgment calls, using intuition, which is just not efficient in the end, especially as you grow as a business. So to me, it's about efficiency. I looked at hundreds of these businesses to try to acquire them.
Yeah.
E-commerce is so inefficient, yet so scalable at the same time. And that's the opportunity, I think, in a nutshell.
Quick follow-on question. I know, Elliot, we're already past time, but Will, I know because you guys are actually doing some AI, you are computationally quite complex in terms of the work that you guys are doing. What is your sense in terms of how you actually, facilitate that data integration today? Do you need a BI person, or do you think some of these self-serve like data viz tools that are emerging are capable enough to achieve a synthesis of these disparate data sets already without somebody who's data savvy in the mix?
I actually think we're almost, like, funny enough, we're almost there. Like I'm gonna say almost there. It could be 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is. We're almost there, because the inputs into like our model, for instance, are not complicated. Yeah. And that's the reason why I joined. It's aggregate data. I mean, it's taking probability. We can obviously improve it probably with more specific data that comes in through these other systems. But that specificity might get you another percentage point or two. It's not going to, like, we're already almost there. So you don't need a data scientist. You don't need anyone, because all we need to do is get access to the data. These systems themselves are standardized, most of them. And that's the most important piece here, is that we need to make sure the systems themselves have data integrity and standardization. But Meta does, Google does, TikTok does, all of them do. So the data is already there. Now it's just about trusting the system. I think that's the biggest hurdle that we're going to face in this next stage, which is, how do you trust a model to make a decision for you? How do you feel confident that you can just take the hands off the keys, right? And then eventually allow the system to make the decision for you. Because we already do that with Meta today, right? We give them the keys for most of our marketing spend. Yet if you gave them the keys and said, just put in Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, I could promise you it's going to be incredibly inefficient, because we've seen that time and time again, that they're figuring out their optimization within Advantage Plus, and they're constantly changing that. So why trust that system? And not everyone does, but a lot of people do. And they just concentrate it into that, and they concentrate into PMAX, and they call it done. Yeah, that is where they start to lose the efficiency right out of the gate. But eventually that should be the goal, is like, there should be all automated systems that make the optimal decision for you based on a set of constraints that you set as an operator, and also like augmenting it with data that's more personalized from there.
Fantastic.
Half part.
Fantastic. Elliot,
Oh,
sorry
this
for
is
taking us
awesome.
down the data tangent. I feel like that kind of
No, I
yeah,
love the
focus.
data tangent. That's why I showed up today, to get an education. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, Ben, and Will, for showing up. Will and Hannah, thanks for subbing in last minute. Incredibly brave of you. If I didn't say anything, I don't think anyone would have known. Alexei, always a pleasure to co-host with you,
Likewise.
and I'd love to do this again with you guys.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks for
Have a
having
good
me.
one.
Adios.
Cheers, man.